Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the School District of Springfield Township Board of School Directors regular board meeting, May 18th, 2015. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading of the mission statement. Mr. Reyer.
The mission of the School District of Springfield Township is to educate and develop all students as learners and citizens who are high-achieving, resilient, and responsible in a changing global community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Roll call.
Ms. Casales, Mr. Lapidus, Mr. Reyer, here. Mr. Richardson, here. Ms. Sarsfield,
Here.
Ms. Schultz,
Here.
Dr. Karakuski, Mr. Taylor, here. Ms. Lipinski.
Here. Are there any public comments on agenda items? Approval of minutes. April 7th, 2015, interim meeting, board minutes N, and April 21st, 2015, regular meeting, board minutes O. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Reyer.
Excuse me. Ms. Casales, Mr. Reyer. Aye. Mr. Richardson. Aye. Ms. Sarsfield.
Aye.
Dr. Karakuski. Mr. Taylor. Aye. Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Approval of treasurer's reports?
Oh, you didn't call him.
Ms. Schultz.
Aye. Approval of treasurer's report. Treasurer's report J. Is there a motion? Second? Second. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Reyer. Aye. Mr. Richardson. Aye. Ms. Sarsfield.
Aye.
Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor. Aye. Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Reports and information. This evening there will not be a district PTA report. Instead, I'm going to turn it over to...
Thank you, Mrs. Lipinski. Since we have some students here this evening, we thought that we would do this first, so we would give them an opportunity to go home and do their homework. It is my pleasure to introduce Dan Meter and Marlene Thornton, who are here tonight to help us introduce students who were winners at the Greenfield Youth Film Festival. We have some of their awards located on the table in front, but I'm going to allow Dan and Marlene to talk about the Greenfield Film Festival, and then we have a short video clip because we wanted to highlight the excellent work of our students and the reason that they are award winners. So, Dan, take it away.
Okay. At the Greenfield Youth Film Festival this year, there were 18 schools that submitted over 250 films. We were lucky and our work was fabulous, and we had 5 winners at the festival this year.
In addition, we also had a student win a high school Emmy for his long-form fiction film. And one of our films is actually moving on tomorrow to another level of competition in the computer fair, in the state computer fair. So we're going to let the video clips speak for themselves. You'll get a chance to see who won, what award, and what for. It's just 60 seconds from each film, not all the films. The films were 6 minutes, 13 minutes, and so on. So enjoy the films.
Guatemala, a place so beautiful in appearance and culture, but fundamentally faulty in education.
The police are here.
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, Detective Carter. This is my partner, Detective Rowland, and Officer McGovern. Ma'am, I need you to tell me everything that happened.
Well, my husband and I had come home from the cinema at 3 o'clock. We were attending a dinner party tonight, so I went upstairs to get ready. I wanted to wear the new necklace I had just bought. However, when I went to get the necklace, it was missing. And this was in its place.
Over, huh? I know exactly who did this. Candace Sawyer and Clyde Adams. There it is.
What did you do to your room?
It wasn't me, it was a ghost.
Don't blame this on a ghost. You'll be cleaning this up in the morning.
Need it.
Earl, it's time.
Wait! Bloody, I dropped it! Son of a...
Intimidated, I had put off auditioning for fear of being rejected. Certain that my body type was not the one that the school searched for, and that my technique was not good enough, the idea of auditioning filled me with dread. Finally, my mother convinced me to audition. I showed up at the audition scared out of my mind. The receptionist told me to put my point shoes on and showed me to the studio where my class with the students of the Pennsylvania Ballet would be. The director entered to teach class, and when the pianist began to play, a funny thing started happening. My fears melted away. With each combination, I became more and more confident and comfortable. And sure enough, a week later, there was an email from the director saying how excited he was to see me at the school in the fall. Happier than ever, I was still presented with the hardest choice of my life. With the increased hours, fees, and health expenses that came with dance, it seemed impossible to still attend private school. My parents presented me with a decision: ballet or school. Picking school meant staying at my private school.
So, who made it to the final round? Are you serious? Let's play.
Just like I thought. You still don't have what it takes to beat me.
What are you talking about? Look! You lost to my invisible black diamond trick.
I told you. So how's the round between us sound?
Sounds good. Good game.
So with us, we have Elizabeth Alt is here tonight, so she can come on up, Elizabeth. We have Chris Cush here with us as well. Ben Zimmerman is here with us. Did I see anyone else walk in? No? Come on up, guys. You can come on up. Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth, Ben, Chris, you did a phenomenal job. Thank you for bringing your awards as well. We're happy to be able to share your terrific work with the board and with the audience members who are here tonight. Continue doing great creative things. It's really a pleasure to be able to see your products. Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Student Council report. Do we have Student Council members here tonight? Good. Holly Ludwig and Emily Giampetro.
Hi, I'm Holly Ludwig and I'm a junior here.
Hi, and I'm Emily. I'm a sophomore. Sorry. And we're here for the Student Council update. So on April 28th, the 8th graders came and visited the high school. The students met with the administrators and the students learned about the typical day and received athletic information. They also toured the high school and viewed the video yearbook. We are very excited to have them next year as the freshman class. The freshman orientation will be held on Wednesday, September 2nd.
On Friday, May 8th, we hosted our annual Red Cross blood drive. Students, faculty, and staff donated 66 bags this year. This Friday, the high school will hold its annual fun-in this Sunday. Students and staff will participate in an afternoon filled with frisbee, volleyball, field hockey, or street hockey, flag football, softball, tennis, soccer, and a variety of lawn games. We are keeping our fingers crossed for a beautiful day.
And on behalf of the entire STHS student body, we thank Mr. Payne, Mr. Fuller, Dr. Rittenhouse, Dr. Hacker, Dr. Atkinson, the entire administration team, and our wonderful school board for a fantastic year. We appreciate all that you do for the students of Springfield, and we wish you a safe, restful, and fun summer. Thank you.
Next, we have reports of committees. Finance Committee, Ben Reyer.
Thank you. Filling in for the chair, Mr. Lapidus, we had a Finance Committee meeting this past week. And at that meeting, we discussed the budget for the upcoming year. And rather than spoil the details of that, I'm going to let that to Dr. Hacker, who's going to do a presentation on that tonight. The meeting was attended by me, but I'd be happy to fill in any questions after the budget presentation by Dr. Hacker.
Next is the Property Committee report, James Taylor.
We had our meeting on Friday. We had a presentation from Gilbert Architects on the feasibility study that was due, and there's going to be an overview tonight by them, and there's also a recommendation by our Property Committee that's due for tonight as well. We talked about charging outside user groups on the use of our facilities. We were asked to look into what was going on with some of the costs that were involved with a lot of the after-school activities. Some of the biggest user groups were the Township Park and Recreation Programs and SAC. The EEHSP also uses facilities regularly, and we're suggesting standard fees for participants to help cover some of the district costs that are involved with the upkeep of our facilities after these groups have used them. And there's going to be a recommendation by the board to review the policy and make adjustments in the fees. We also had a review of the Service Master Progress and Contract Agreement. There's continuing to review and monitor performance. Supporting documentation's been presented by them for what they've been doing to make sure everything is clean. And there's also a meeting scheduled on May 21st for contract discussion. We also discussed the bus garage site characterization report. The most recent groundwater monitoring results show conditions are stable. The results are being shared with the DEP, and documentation is being prepared for the completion of a final report. We still have to monitor the groundwater for another 4 quarters after the report has been submitted. And our next meeting will be on Friday, June the 12th at 8:15 in the morning.
Thank you. Next, we have our administrative report by Dr. Nancy Hacker.
Thank you again, Mrs. Slipinski. I have 2 things that I would like to announce before I begin my final budget, our proposed final budget presentation. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to commend the entire staff and the entire student body of the middle school for the wonderful day of service that they had this past Friday. I included in each board member's packet and also by the minutes over by the table a copy of the places that our students went to from the middle school in order to perform activities for the day of service. It was an unbelievably wonderful day. There is a video that's going to be posted to the middle school website. It's about a 12-minute long video that really highlights what the students did during this day of service. And it was a phenomenal day. The 6th graders got into the spirit of things, even though it was their first year, making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, filling bags of toiletries, and also their very own flea market, which they held outside on the field. So it was really a wonderful day, and I just want to again thank all of the staff at the middle school as well as the entire student body for their selfless participation in all of these different events. It was a great day. Secondly, I would like to announce that after a very exhaustive search process and a very intensive interview process, we found the ideal candidate to replace retiring Principal Chris Bradley at Erdenheim Elementary School, and we were fortunate enough to find him right in our own backyard. So I'm very happy to be able to introduce the new principal of Erdenheim Elementary as of July 1, 2015. He's got tough shoes to fill, but we know that he can do it. Mr. Andre McLaurin. Andre?
Good evening, everyone. So I would like to take the opportunity just to say thank you to the board and to Dr. Hacker, the administrative team, and also thank you to Chris Bradley for laying such an amazing foundation down in Erdenheim. I couldn't be more excited to be a Spartan and still continue to be a part of this family. I've grown so attached to this community for just being here for 2.5 years, and I'm looking forward to continue to build relationships with the kids, with the family, and with the teachers, and just looking forward to having an exciting time. So I just wanted to take this opportunity once again to say thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Andre, and we are very, very excited about the prospect of your taking over at Erdenheim. We know that this is going to be a wonderful transition for you, and just so everyone knows, to help smooth that transition, Andre and I are going to be meeting this week and talking about opportunities for him to begin to get to know the staff and the students before the summer begins. We plan on having a meet and greet. I spoke with Mrs. Bradley today about arranging something with the faculty, and we'll have plenty of opportunities where the parents will be coming to numerous events events, and they'll have an opportunity to meet Andre as well. So I know he's anxious to get started and to begin forging relationships, and we have every confidence, Andre, that you're going to do a fantastic job, and you have a great person to learn from in Mrs. Bradley.
Thank you.
So let me begin by saying that this would not be possible if it were not for all of the very hard work of our business administrator, Mr. Ken King. I want to thank him for crunching the numbers. As always, he does a fantastic job. And as everyone knows, the goal of every budget that we propose, whether at the preliminary level in January or our proposed final budget, is always to maintain what we have without compromising the wonderful services and the quality of the services that we deliver. So this slide really summarizes what our district goals are in terms of the approaches that we take to budget preparation. The budget represents the wants and needs, as I'm fond of saying, of our community staff and students. And it's always a balance, because one individual's wants or needs, as they define those, may be different from someone else's. So somebody has to make a determination about what the priorities for the district as a whole are. So it's always a complex process that is involved in terms of trying to make those determinations. So just to review, this is our budget process, which begins actually in October of the fall of the current school year. And obviously that makes things a little bit difficult to try to predict what we're going to need for the following school year. So the first step that we generally make is to start looking at our department and school level budgets. The principals and our other administrators start looking at those budgets. They take a long historical overview of their spending over the past several years in order to be able to see what really have I needed over those past years, what's my current spending level, so therefore what will I need for the following year. We also have to take into consideration staffing levels. Are we going to have increased enrollments? Are there going to be retirees, for example? Do we need to eliminate any programs? Are we adding new courses? So all of those things come into consideration as well. Then Mr. King begins to start compiling, based on information that he's getting from various sources, our revenue figures coming in from the state. Usually they come in sometime around March. Our local revenue, he looks at our current tax rates in terms of where have we been in terms of collections over the years. And we also begin to look at the federal dollars that are coming in, which unfortunately are not that much. And then again, we look at our unusual expenses. PSERS, our retirement contributions, keep continuing to go up. So we take a look at what our PSERS costs are going to be. It's always a percentage of our total salaries. We look at health care, our dental costs, our medical costs, and so forth. And we look at other things such as our capital projects. And once we have all of this information, and it takes several months to compile all of this, then we can start going back and we can start refining the earlier estimates that we had between October and December. We continually do this. That's why it's called a continuous cycle, because even as late as April and the beginning of May, we're constantly going back and refining those numbers, and they are extraordinarily precise down to the dollar. So this is a look back to where we were in January. If you recall, at that point, we made a point of saying that the allowable increase for our tax rate was a 1.9% as determined by the state based on a variety of indicators, and that was going to raise for us approximately $716,000. At that point, when we looked at all the budget numbers that we had, we were up considerably higher than that. We had about a $1.8 million deficit, or rather increase in terms of where we were. So we had to find ways, obviously, to trim that 4.74% increase in order to get down to that 1.9% in order to make index. There was a deficit of a little over $1 million. The board at that point approved some exceptions which allow you to go above the index, but of course one of our primary goals at the start of this school year was to try to maintain our tax increase to index or below, so that was our goal. This shows a comparison of our total budget over the past several years, and it's not that difficult to understand that the budget keeps going up. Our costs continue to rise, particularly in the area of salaries and benefits, as you'll see very shortly, and this shows that increase over time. So where does the money come from? Where do we get our revenues? And I had reviewed the same information back in January, but just to once again highlight the fact that very little of our money comes from other sources other than local revenue. That means that the burden of paying for everything in our school district budget is essentially on the taxpayers. Very little of the money comes in from the state, and even less than that comes from the federal government. So as you can see, local taxes have to pay, and that's where the burden falls, as I said, on the local taxpayer. And you can see approximately where those numbers fall. So this shows it in a little bit more detail. Out of an approximately $51 million budget, you'll see that the state and the federal revenue total only about 18% of that total budget projected for next year. State revenue, even though it's a little bit higher this year, not by a significant amount, has come in at a little bit over $8.7 million. And that's made up of not only our basic education subsidy, which is projected to rise based on what the governor has proposed, and a slight increase in our special ed subsidy, but it also includes some monies for transportation reimbursement, part of our PSERS subsidy, and also the homestead allocation, better known as gambling funds. Our federal revenue comes in the form of Title I and Title II dollars, as well as some reimbursement for medical expenses through Access. And again, down below, local revenue, almost $42 million of our $51 million budget. 82% of it comes from not only local taxes, but also other taxes that we have in the community. Our earned income tax, delinquent tax, collections and interest rates, and other kinds of tuition and fees. So where do we spend that money? Very simply, the bulk of it, approximately 72% of the money, almost 3/4 of it, goes towards salaries and benefits. So you can well imagine when it comes to trying to trim the budget and cut back in order to eke out efficiencies, it's very difficult to do that because so much of it is spent on human capital. And that is all of the individuals that are in the school district who make things work. So how do expenditures compare to previous years? I wanted to highlight this particular slide because what it does is it takes a 3-year look at the budget. And what you will notice is the first 2 line items, salaries and benefits, have, as I just said, gone up. Salaries have increased because we have contracts which include increases. We've hired more staff depending upon needs and increased enrollments and addition of programs and courses. And our benefits costs have increased as well. So the first 2 line items I've noted in black because they have steadily increased over the past 3 years, including next year. But what you will notice is in the next group of line items, this year we have decreases in every single one of them except at the bottom, which is principal and transfers from our debt service. So you will notice in 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, and 800, all of our budget line items, we have done an excellent job not just of controlling costs, but actually lowering them. And for the columns that are noted all in red, such as the 300 line item, which includes, for example, our substitutes, our Kelly services, our attorney fees, our auditors, our architects, our accountants, and so forth, you'll see straight across from the 13-14 budget, the 14-15, until the 15-16, every single year, our 15-16 proposed final budget cost is the lowest. That shows that we've done a really outstanding job for this proposed budget of trimming costs. So again, I just want to repeat, every line where you see red going across, it means this year, for the coming 15-16 school year, we have the lowest cost for that line item in the past 3 years. Pretty remarkable. Let me just highlight that approximately $500,000 was cut from all of the administrative and building budgets between the preliminary budget in January and the current proposed budget for 15-16. So that was a significant amount of work that our administrators went to when we went back and said, do what you can to try to trim your budget. And as you can see, it really does have a significant impact in the areas that we are able to control. So where is the money going? Our actual total expenses, even though our total revenue is coming in at $51 million, are higher at $55 million. And what makes up for that almost $4.5 million difference is a transfer from our fund balance. We don't typically do this. This is a one-time fund balance transfer that we've actually planned for over many, many years. Over the past several years, we've set aside monies anticipating that we will need fund balance transfers for certain projects that we have, as well as for the projected increases in PSERS over time. So we very wisely, over the past several years, put money aside in our fund balance so that we would have it when we needed it. And that day has come. So we have money that is being transferred over to help us fund some of our capital projects, replacing our aged bus fleet. We have some buses which are between 18 and 20 years old, which we believe actually need to be replaced because we don't feel that safe. Our PSERS offset, and of course, when we renegotiated our teacher's contract and we built in an early retirement incentive, again, we wisely allocated funds in fund balance to help pay for that over a 3-year period of time for the contract duration. Some of the significant things, however, despite our wise saving in the budget and the fiscal conservancy that you saw, we have some very significant initiatives that we're very happy and pleased that we're still going to be able to fund in this budget. One of them you heard us talk about in a previous presentation was our Chromebook Initiative. The Chromebook Initiative was a pilot program this year in 8th and 9th grade. And we're very, very happy to be able to say that we had initially planned for that initiative to take place in grade 6th grade through 12. But Mr. McLaurin's going to be happy to hear that we are now moving it down to grades 4 and 5 as well. So now it will be a 4th grade through 12th grade initiative, and I have no doubt that all of the students are going to be delighted to get their Chromebooks and see the exciting things they can do with that new technology. The second major initiative, we've actually planned for the next several years to set aside monies for new athletic equipment and uniforms. Mr. Payne has told us that we are in desperate need of replacing a good deal of our athletic equipment. We're Spartans. We want to show a proud face when we send our teams to play other teams in our leagues. So we want to make sure they have good, safe equipment, and we also want to make sure they look good and represent us well on the field. So we've allocated money in this year's budget and plan to do so in the next several years as well in order to help fund the purchase. I mentioned the bus replacement. We're also going to have, because of increased enrollments, a brand new teacher at Odin Elementary. So this will help us with class size reduction. And of course, we have to fund that new classroom that we're going to have at Odin, so we have budgeted for new classroom supplies as well as furniture and other equipment for that classroom. And then finally, the last one I want to point out, in of itself, it's not that unusual that we're hiring a new maintenance individual for HVAC, but what makes this particularly notable is the fact that over the years, we've basically outsourced that to other mechanical companies who have come in. When we analyze the costs of outsourcing all of the repairs that we've done in the area of HVAC, we determined it was going to be significantly less expensive to hire our own dedicated individual who we would have on site every day who could handle those issues for us. So those are some of the significant things that we are handling in this budget, despite all the other efficiencies. So this takes a look at what I call the leveled increases. You can see it kind of averages out over time to a not so significant rate. We don't have extreme highs and extreme lows. That's why it's called leveled. And this is where we are now. Over time, we've come in from a 4.74% tax increase in January down to a 1.77% tax increase that we are recommending for the proposed final budget, which again is one of the lowest that we've had in the past 4 years. So where does that increase actually come from? And what this slide basically details for you is how do we determine that rate? It's basically based on the total assessed value of all the properties in the district. We multiply that figure by the collection rate. We come up with, from that figure, the number of mills that we need in order to generate the local revenue from our tax base. And then we have to figure out from last year's mills to this year's mills, what the budget is costing us in terms of needed revenue. What is that percentage difference that we need to get from last year's rate to this year's rate? So what you will notice if you take a look at that figure, we figured it was 1.77%, and that's going to raise approximately $669,000. Again, if you remember, our deficit when we looked at it back in January was about $1.7 million. We've reduced that by approximately $1 million. So that shows how we got to where we are currently. We think it's a fiscally efficient budget. We think it covers many of the much needed items that we've determined from our conversations with staff members and administration, what we really need in this budget, and yet we feel it's a beneficial budget as far as the taxpayers are concerned. So this is what it means for the average taxpayer. There's a monthly increase in taxes that equals approximately $6.76. And if you look back to 2007-8, you can see it was almost $20, so that's a pretty significant difference. And even though it is an increase, it is nonetheless one of the lower increases we've actually had in the past 12 years. So again, despite the fact that we've had increasing costs, particularly in the line items for salaries and benefits, every single year, we've managed to hold down costs in other areas. And so again, that points to our fiscal efficiency. Any questions or comments?
Thanks, Dr. Hacker. I thought I'd take the opportunity as a member of the Finance Committee and the chair for the past 3 years just to ask a couple of questions, but I'd first like to make a couple of comments as I have historically. So with Mr. Lapidus' absence, I hope he won't mind, but I just wanted to note for the community, and I know that people may listen to this, that the board, I know, and the Finance Committee in particular, takes really seriously the decision to balance what's needed for a school system with the amount of money our community can afford to pay for that school system. But we begin with the premise that the most important thing a great community can have is a great public school system. And so it's a balance to figure out what is the right amount of money to spend and what is right to ask of the district to cut and be efficient. And I think over the past 4 years that we've done a really good job of that. And I want to commend your team at the schools, all the teachers and the parents and the staff members and the school leaders, your team, and the board for doing their best. And just want to remind folks that it's not just about cutting in this case, but it's about doing things to create more efficient and effective school district. So a school district that invests more in its capital program, so more improvements to facilities over the past 4 years, spends more time thinking about academics, increasing the number of AP courses in the high school, increasing PSSA scores, things like that are really important to us. It's not just about how much money can we get you to cut, but to balance that really thoughtfully. So I'll be the first to admit that I don't like the idea of having to ask the community to pay more for schools, but at the same time I also know as a member of the community that it's probably the most important thing we can do is to make sure we have a great school system. So we've done all that, and I think we've done a great job in that way. You know, I don't know that many people understand that 25% of the salaries of the people who work here have to be paid into a pension system that we have no control over. It's mandated by the state government, and in many ways I like to say shame on them for not trying to do more about dealing with that problem instead of passing the buck to local governments to deal with. And those are very difficult situations. So we're doing the best we can, and I want to just make sure we pointed that out. With that said, I do have 2 questions I wanted to ask. One was, we have never before done this transfer from the fund balance, which is this idea of taking the rainy day funds and moving them to pay for one-time expenditures, which is what they should be used for. So we were very lucky last year to have our credit rating upgraded, which is a big deal. So that means in these very difficult financial times, our credit rating is actually going up, meaning we have a very strong financial position. So I'm just wondering, with us doing this transfer this one time, the impact it's going to have on that credit rating, if you know. Mr. King does.
Fortunately, yes, we both do know, and we actually verify this with the person who handles our credit. So I'm actually going to let Mr. King answer that question because he spoke with Jamie Doyle, who handles all of our debt and our refinancing and those kinds of figures for us, and the news is good. So Mr. King, I'll let you share.
Thank you. There are a lot of different components that go into a bond rating. One of which is fund balance, and it's generally, the rating companies generally look at fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. Although they're not specifically willing to tell you what some of those thresholds are between a good rating and a bad rating, but I've seen our reports that list 16%, 18%, 20% as strong. Even after this transfer that we're proposing is done, we will be twice that, at 32% of expenses. So our fund balance will be about 32% of our expenses after the transfer. So we don't anticipate this transfer as having any negative impact on our
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I feel like I'm dominating. All right, I'm going to stop there then. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you all for your support. And we will be, pending tonight's vote, releasing the proposed final budget for public review over the next 30 days before we finalize our budget preparation. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Hector. Thank you, Mr. King. Now we're going to move on to the feasibility study presentation by Gilbert Architects.
And as Danielle Hoffer and Rod Fry come on up, I'm going to introduce Danielle from Gilbert Associates to talk about our district-wide feasibility or facility study. This came about actually after many years of conversation that have taken place at the board level about the future of our school district, including not only what were we going to do with all of our buildings in terms of their infrastructure, capacity for increasing enrollments down through the years, but also our fields and the use of those fields, as well as all other areas. So this has been going on for a significant period of time. Another aspect of those discussions has focused on what used to be Penn Manor Elementary School, what is currently the Antonelli property down on Montgomery Avenue. We approved an extension of their current lease a couple years ago, but of course that's an aging property, and we know that the roof is in severe need of repair, so we had to make some decisions about how to move forward with the Antonelli School property as well. So in the fall, if you recall, I came to the board and I recommended that we conduct a district-wide feasibility study in order to get an objective view of all of our district properties, including not only the infrastructure and the external buildings, but also all of the land that we owned. I felt it was important to have someone come in, and rather than us doing the guesswork, as confident as we were at our many property meeting and board meeting discussions that we knew there were certain things that probably needed to be done, we wanted to have professionals come in and take a look at all of our district-owned property and provide us with recommendations for our long-term planning and our next steps. So Gilbert Architects, who is going to be building on our cafeteria addition at Erdenheim Elementary in order to accommodate our increased enrollment, actually had the lowest bid in order to do that feasibility study. And within a very, very rapid turnaround, they have come back to us now with the results of that study. So they're going to very quickly go through some of the things that they have come up with. We are not making any definitive decisions at this point. Obviously, the recommendations are just that at this point. These are recommendations. There will be many opportunities for public input over the next several months, and most likely many more discussions amongst the board members as well in terms of the viability of these plans. So I'm going to turn this now over to Danielle Hoffer, who's going to go through their PowerPoint. Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you, Dr. Hacker. That was such an excellent introduction that I'm going to just cut to the chase here. All right, I'm going to give you an overview of the district-wide study, and to start, I'm going to tell you what's included in the study. And it's basically a process of data collection, which is represented in sections 1 through 4. And then based on that data collection, we develop construction options to determine what can be done at your facilities to meet some of the demands and some of the issues that we identified in the first 4 sections. So we start, and this is really one of the things that the district-wide study is also does for a school district. If a district ever intends to build a new building or renovate a building and get reimbursement from the Department of Education, the first step that they need to do is prepare a district-wide facility study. So the way that we formatted the district-wide study is relevant to what is required in PlanCon, which is an acronym for Planning for Construction. So the first section is the overview. We also took the information provided by the Montgomery County Planning Commission and summarized the findings in that. Section 3 is the building capacity analysis. We also did building evaluations on the schools and support buildings that you see there. And then from that data collection, we developed construction options in Section 5. We're also required to provide the author's credentials. And what we're also doing as part of the study is we're providing floor plans relative not only to the existing conditions, but also the proposed options, which we'll put in an appendix. In case you want to publish it on the internet, that part would be left out because we don't want to publish floor plans on your website. So here we go. So district overview, the requirements are to identify the location of the school district, the geography, population, and wealth. We'll also include the school district's K-12 educational program. Section 2 is that enrollment analysis that we took the information provided by Montgomery County and summarized the findings in that study. So looking at the historical enrollment over the last 10 years, you can see up until last year there was a 158 student increase in 9 years. Over the last year, the student population district-wide increased 80 students in just 1 year. Now looking at the projected enrollments, looking at the next 5 years out, there's going to be an increase of 198 students in 4 years, but then you add those 80 students in that were for last year, and you have a total of 278 students that increased in just 5 years. And then it moderates if you look 10 years out. And enrollment projections are most accurate within the first 5 years. When you start getting 10 years out, then it becomes a little bit more iffy, but just providing that information that was developed in the study. Looking by grade group, the high school 10 years ago was the highest population of any of your schools in the district. And you can see the crossover where Odin started to take over and is now the highest population in the school district. Looking at the enrollment projections, Odin will continue to have the highest population, and then you can see the crossover again 5 years out as the students move from the elementary schools to the middle school and through the high school. And so in looking at the conclusion of that enrollment analysis, looking at Enfield, enrollments will decrease in the next 5 years by 94 students, but if you look 9 years out, you're going to be gaining some additional students, so there's a bit of a recovery there. At Erdenheim, enrollments will continue to increase by 74 students to a projected high in 2017-2018, but 9 years out, it'll start to decline significantly. Looking at the secondary schools, again, as that population starts to move through the system, the larger class size at the middle school will increase by 111 students in year 2020-21, and then it'll decrease 10 years out in the next, as those students start to move through the high school. And then, again, it keeps moving out in number of years. And so in 9 years, you're looking at 245 students in years 2023, 24 for the high school. Okay, the third section is looking at the building capacity analysis. The whole point of this section is to determine how your buildings are handling these populations coming through. And there's two ways of looking at building capacity. We look at it from the reimbursable capacity that is outlined by the Department of Education. And for elementary schools, they factor 25 students per classroom 100% of the time. That's what I mean by 100% utilization. They'll pack 25 students in each classroom all day long. And then at secondary schools, they look at that 25 students and look at a 90% utilization rate, understanding that kids are not, in elementary schools, you have kids in the classroom pretty much all day, and then they go to art and music. Whereas in high school and middle school, they're moving around through more programs associated with that curriculum. Well, from a planning standpoint, we look at what's recommended by the Council of Educational Facility Planners International, which is the acronym for CEFP, and look at the functional capacity based on the following. In elementary school, we use a utilization factor of 90%, understanding that we don't want to build a school at full capacity. You want to have some fluctuation for those larger class sizes coming through. If you were to take 90% times 25, you're looking at about 22.5 students. I don't know how you get by 0.5 students in a classroom, but roughly that many students in a classroom. So it gives you a little bit of fluctuation if there's a higher class size coming through. At secondary schools, 85% utilization at the middle school, 80% at the high school. Okay, well, let me show you what that means. So we charted this, and the first, looking at Enfield, the yellow column is the PDE reimbursement, the green column is the functional capacity. And you get 25 students per classroom. This isn't working very good. 25 students per classroom in the kindergarten, 25 students in the regular, you times that out. And if you look at the bottom, at 100% utilization, you get 475 students based on the PDE reimbursement capacity versus 428 students looking at 90% utilization. And the same thing holds out for Erdenheim. At the high school, like I said, there's many other program areas that get capacity. And you look at the bottom, 90% utilization, and 85% at the middle school, 80% at the high school. And that's adding, the top chart there is adding all the schools together in terms of how much capacity all the schools together. But the money chart is the one down on the bottom. If you look at the 2000, don't lose, I'm trying not to lose you now. This is where it starts getting interesting. If you look at the chart on the bottom, 2014-15, and you look at each individual school at the current grade configuration, anything in red means that it's over capacity. It's not something you don't already know. And you can see that Erdenheim is at, just in the reimbursement for capacity for PDE, you're at 93. But if you look at the recommended functional capacity at Erdenheim, you're well over 100% utilization at 103. So that's when it starts to tell me that you have some issues there. And in talking to the principal, they're using any available space that they can for any support spaces, including closets. Now, if you look 5 years out from now, in 2019, 2020, you're still seeing some red at Erdenheim. You're at 109% utilization, functional capacity, and 10 years out, you're at 92% at Erdenheim. So you're still having problems in the future at Erdenheim. The secondary schools, the Springfield, the middle school and the high school, have been fine in all the enrollment projections. You're getting close at Enfield, but not as bad as Erdenheim. The fourth part of the evaluation and the data collection was the building evaluations. And we all, the architects, myself and Rod and our team, and our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing consultants all visited the buildings, and our civil engineer toured the sites. We met with the principals and the director of operations, and we developed floor plans based on the existing conditions information that we gathered. And the report that were generated is still in process. But what I'd like to do is just hit the highlights with this in the essence of time. Looking at Enfield, site observations, it's a little over 8 acres. We were there at dismissal in the afternoon. As you know, the buses stack up along Paper Mill. Very busy intersection at Church and Paper Mill. We thought we were in the floodplain area, but we're actually not. This is a floodplain map that you see below. But the fields, nonetheless, have been, because of the grading, continue to be wet most of the time, and it's difficult to use them for playtime. A large portion of the building is original construction, 1948, which is 67 years old. The building was really never designed as a primary center for K-1. Typically, we have toilet rooms in each of the classrooms. There's only 4 classrooms that have toilet rooms directly adjacent to the kindergarten, to those classrooms. They're not kindergarten classrooms. Several floor transitions, issues with building security, and renovating this building is not going to solve a lot of the existing conditions with it being right up against the busy intersection, circulation, that type of thing. Erdenheim, the newest building, supporting areas are going to be reassigned as trying to handle some of the enrollments coming through the school. Again, in the essence of time, I'm not going to hit every one of the schools, but looking at the campus plan, we identified a lot of issues associated with this. Looking at one of the things I do when I first come to the school is my experience in entering the school site and how I navigate through the site. And I identifies a lot of problems for myself. Coming into the site here, the traffic coming off of the 309 egress lane and here just funnels. So exiting the site is very difficult. There's a pinch point right here with merging traffic coming along this way versus people that are supposed to circulate around this roundabout take a shortcut coming through here. And since it's such a pinch point there, it is a security or a safety issue. I couldn't find any parking. There's plenty of parking out here, but couldn't find any parking, so navigated around the school till I came to a dead end, came all the way back out here, parked at the end of the parking lot, walked in high heels all the way back over to the main entrance. And it was difficult for me to find the main entrance, first of all, because it was kind of hard for me to identify, because you really can't see it from your entry point into the site. So, and then the playfields are used 100% of the time, a lot of management of the playfield time schedule. And the high school tennis, right now the competition tennis courts are on the middle school site, so the middle school kids have to come over to the high school site so the high school kids can use the competition courts. And then the middle school kids have to go to the softball field at the Antonelli site. So there's some program issues associated with the playfields. Looking at the high school, we identified a lot of issues just with the program spaces around the athletic departments, entry, locker rooms, going upstairs and using the fitness room. And the other thing coming into the new entry point, there's a, obviously it's the handicapped accessible issue, the entrance to the site, but you're met by a security person that needs to be there to allow people into the building. But We were looking at a different area for the location of the main entrance, but it seemed that centrally located where it is now, although not ideal, we were looking at how we could improve some of the safety and security issues there, but that's all the things that we're kind of thinking about right now in terms of the layout of the building. The bus garage is in this floodplain. The fleet is staged, some of the fleet is staged at the middle school. Drivers park at the bus garage and then have to go to the middle school to get on the buses to drive. The Antonelli site is not in the floodplain, so just over 10 acres. It's a slope site, and it's currently a rental property. So based on all that data collection that we did, we came up with some construction options on how you could start to consider how to evaluate some of these issues that we identified. And the key planning considerations that we look at is accessibility and life safety, the physical plan of the building, meaning the building envelope, and the systemic components of the building like mechanical, and program. How can your buildings deliver how are they delivering the program? So looking at the primary schools, one of our recommendations was to construct a new K-2 elementary school at the Antonelli site to replace Enfield Elementary School. Provide 2 to 4 temporary modular classrooms at Odin School to accommodate the enrollments for the next 3 or 4 years. Demolish after the new school is constructed, demolish the existing Enfield Elementary School and provide additional play fields for the secondary program. So let me show you what that looks like. So we did a conceptual plan of how a building could be laid out at the Antonelli site. I'm going to walk over here again to kind of walk you through it. This is Paper Mill Road. This is Montgomery Avenue. We have separation of parent and bus drop-off, with the parent drop-off coming up off of Paper Mill Road, circulating onto the site, dropping off in front of the building, and exiting onto Paper Mill. The buses would come onto Montgomery Avenue, circulate around the building, and exit onto Montgomery Avenue. The buses that we're showing here align the sidewalk and also do a chevron pattern, as well as on the sidewalk here to accommodate 18 buses with 4 van-type buses on a smaller loop. We're showing some additional parking here to stage buses that are currently staged over at the middle school, providing some athletic fields as well as soft play areas. And then we have a building that's kind of built into the side of the hill with a main floor level and a lower level of classrooms. And this would again be for grades. I better stay here in case I need to be staying. Looking at Erdenheim, the box in red is looking at doing some temporary modulars there for 2 to 4 classrooms. Obviously, what the impact of the site, if we need to go through the land development process, again, parking issues, play fields would all need to be considered as part of that project. And then looking at how we would develop the Enfield site, the area shown dashed here is the existing building. Once the building comes down, we still maintain the parking, provide a softball field to handle the middle school, and additional fields for the multi-purpose field with some stormwater management on the site for those fields. At the secondary schools, we're looking at doing additions and renovations at the middle school, at the high school, sorry, and reconfigure the site to improve safety, circulation, athletic fields, and parking. And then at the district administration office, we did some site reassessment and looked at some improving the circulation and parking. Now, I haven't talked about the middle school too much, and the note down here talks about the district is currently has 2 projects ongoing in addressing issues with the mechanical systems at the middle school and the district administration building, which is outside the scope of the study, but it is something that's addressing some of the issues that have been brought up as we went through the evaluation of the school district. So looking at the secondary schools, the high school, the area, this is the high school, the area shown hatched is an addition, probably an auxiliary gym, also improving maybe a lobby entrance to really identify those entrances coming into the building. And to be able to see it, what we've done is we've taken the entrance that is currently here and moved it to be adjacent to the stadium bleachers at the stadium. What that does is that it pulls you away from this intersection so that you have better queue time to get out, and it pulls you so that you can actually see the entrances coming into the school. We've relocated the parking central to the school as well as to the athletic fields that wrap around the entire building. What we're showing here is a synthetic turf on the football field, a multi-purpose field that's also could be in synthetic, looking at a baseball for varsity, some additional parking, again centrally located, that could accommodate athletics as well as the building. Continuing this access drive around the building so you don't have that dead-end condition coming up to this parking lot over here, and then providing some additional softball fields, a tennis courts that's a little bit closer to the tennis courts there at the middle school, as well as some playfill area for Enfield. This plan is showing some additional parking at the district administration building, provides some circulation, same circulation path that you currently have now, but then tiers the parking so that you have some additional parking, as well as wrapping parking around between the administration area and the tennis courts. So that's kind of where we're at with everything right now. One of the things that we wanted to bring to your attention, though, is some proposed budget implications for PlanCon reimbursement. In the Governor Wolf's current budget, there's a line item that says that he's intending to reinstate a moratorium on PlanCon A and B submissions as of July 1st, 2015. Now what that means for your school district is that PlanCon A is project justification, PlanCon B is schematic design. It's the first step, actually feasibility study is the first step, so you're well on your way. But it's the first step in doing the application process for a school district to receive reimbursement for a construction project. There's also proposed legislation that is a bill that's been developed by not only the House but the Senate that pretty much parallel one another, which is kind of scary because they're kind of agreeing on something, but looking at modifying the current PlanCon the way it's set up now. Currently, PlanCon allows for reimbursement, for a school to get reimbursement every 20 years. What the proposed legislation is that they would kick it back to 30 years. So let me just use a high school as an example. Your high school is, the last PlanCon project that you went through was 15 years ago. So you're 15 years into the 20-year rule is what we call it. If that proposed legislation was adopted, you would now need to wait another 15 years to renovate and get reimbursement for your project. There's also in the proposed legislation that, well, okay, so the next part for PlanCon is that currently the way it's structured is that to get reimbursement for a school, for a renovation, the renovation has to exceed 20% of the replacement cost for a new school. So say a school costs $100 million. I'm just using that for round figures, not that you would need to do at least $20 million worth of work in order to get reimbursement. The proposed legislation is going to kick that to 40%. So you can see that it's adversarial to a school district to wait. It's adversarial. What they're doing in terms of this legislation is not to the benefit of the school district. It's benefit to their budget. The other thing that we are able to do now under the current PlanCon guidelines is that, for instance, like your high school is 15 years into the 20-year rule. You are able to get a waiver for those next 5 years if you can prove to them that the building is in need for additional work. It needs whatever, it needs the new MEP systems. And I've applied for many waivers, probably a dozen waivers, and I've been successful getting a waiver every time. Especially when you're at least 15 years into 20. If you're 9, it might be another story. But if the legislation is passed, you have no chance for a waiver because it becomes law. So that factor goes away. Why am I bringing this up to you now? What is this? What are the implications for your school district? If any of the options that may be considered for reimbursement for a project in the future, PlanCon A and B must be submitted on a project before July 1st in order to be in line for potential reimbursement. That's all it's saying. It's just to be in line. It does not commit you to do a PlanCon project. Submissions after July 1st will not be accepted and will not receive reimbursement. That's what the moratorium is. They will not even receive any applications for PlanCon. If the bills in the House and Senate are adopted, submissions made prior to July 1st will not be affected. All those waivers and all the other bumping it up to up to the 30-year rule and up to 40%, none of that stuff would apply if that law is adopted. Submissions made after July 1st will be subject to that law if it is adopted. Again, PlanCon submission of A and B does not commit the board to any project. Doesn't commit you to receive the project. All it is getting you in line that if you do want to proceed with a PlanCon project to get reimbursement, you have the opportunity to do so. Submissions can be modified after we make the submission within the context of the proposed project. For instance, if we decided that if we made a submission on the high school for renovations and additions, and later on it was decided that no, we're going to tear the building down and build a new school, again, hypothetical, that would not fall within the context of the project that was submitted, and that would not be subject to that would be subject to the moratorium, because you've changed the premise of the project. Okay, school board approval. I think one of the things that's going to be recommended is that to meet that July 1st deadline, the administration is asking for authorization to prepare PlanCon A project justification and PlanCon B schematic design for the following projects: for a new K-2 elementary school at Antonelli and renovations and additions to the high school. And then in June, after we've prepared those documents, we would be asking the board for approval to submit those PlanCon documents prior to July 1st. Again, it's to get you in line. It doesn't commit you to a project. This project scope can change. The plans can change. The estimate can change. Lots of things can change as long as within the context of the project submitted.
So Danielle, thank you. I do want to open this up to any questions or comments from board members, but just to clarify what Danielle is saying, on your agenda, you'll see number 11, which is requesting a motion of approval from the board to contract with Gilbert Architects in order to prepare the necessary documentation to submit to the Department of Education for submission of our PlanCon plan. As Danielle said, if we do not do this by July 1, and there is a moratorium that goes into effect, obviously that will hurt us not only in terms of application for any waivers, it will hurt us in terms of reimbursable costs, and it will hurt us in general in terms of the plan that we are at this point discussing. This does not require the board to commit at this point to any of the plans that Danielle has discussed within the PowerPoint. For right now, these are all proposals and recommendations, but we do believe it is in the best interest of the school district to apply to get in under that July 1 deadline without having to commit to moving forward with any projects. Am I correct in the way I phrased that? So we feel that to enter into this agreement with Gilbert to prepare the necessary documentation for PlanCon submission, it puts us into the pipeline should we decide to move forward with any aspects of these recommendations of the facility study.
Question. How long are you allowed to be in the pipeline before you have to make a movement, number one? Number two, you did mention changes can be made, but I'm sure there are some limitations with respect to those changes. So in a short amount of time that we have, are you able to speak on that? How long are you able to stay in the pipeline before you have to move forward? And as far as changes, you know?
School district was required to update their facility study every 2 years. So as long as your facility study, your district-wide study still represents what your intent is moving forward, I think within like 5 years you still have that time frame to work with in terms of maintaining that placeholder. And then your second question was how much can it change? Again, within the context of the project costs can go up or down. If it's a renovations and additions for the high school, for instance, the context, within that context, it can change pretty. I mean, we don't really have very many plans to even submit. We haven't even talked to your administration in detail about it. So a lot of things can change in terms of what is actually implemented as part of the project. But again, like building a new school, that would not be within the context of what was submitted. So does that answer your question?
And as another example, the plan that would be submitted would be for a new K-2 elementary school. We couldn't go back afterwards and say, never mind, we think we're just going to add on a wing or we're going to do some renovations. So it works both ways.
Right.
With the high school, you can't change your mind and say, we think we're now going to build a new high school. With Enfield, you can't change your mind and say, never mind, we think we're just going to do some renovations.
So you're locked into K through 12 at that location, not something else like, I'm making up middle school.
Right.
Right.
I'd like to just mention that we did talk about this in the property committee, and when we say plan-con reimbursement, we did talk about that in the committee about how much that reimbursement would be that we're talking about. Could you just remind me about, it's not a significant amount of money, but it's something that we'd like to capture if we can, and that's why we're here tonight discussing this.
Ken, can you help me out how much that?
Over the term or annually? It was 100,000 a year-ish?
Yeah, understand that you get reimbursed over a 20-year period, which is typically the life of your bond. So it's a.
But we're not talking about like 50% reimbursement.
No.
We're talking about a small amount, maybe 10, 15%. I think that's what we were saying.
18% on the debt service.
But I mean, even that small amount would be helpful for us. So.
It's a figure that's based on our aid ratio.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, since we don't receive a significant amount of aid, as you saw in the budget, it diminishes the amount that we're eligible for. But as you said, we'd rather capitalize on everything that we would be entitled to at this point rather than give that away.
If we would choose to do any of this, we'd like to capture that cost savings as plan-con if we can.
I have some concerns about this process, and that is that I don't think the Erdenheim project was done particularly well, meaning we have this huge elementary school that doesn't really fit the community and is already overcrowded. And I also think it's really important to make sure that we include the community in this process. So if what you're just asking is to take a flyer on putting new turf fields in where Enfield was and deciding that K2 primary school is a better model than K5 or K8, I guess I'm okay with that, and it feels like it's worth $10,000. But I want to be careful about the board prejudging what's best for this community without spending more time in the community. So I'm not part of the property committee, so I don't know if you've done that, but I'd really caution us to chase after $100,000 and be in front of what is the right thing for our community.
So we have talked about next steps, and obviously this is a lengthier process than what it has been since the time we actually received this information about the results of the facility study and where we are tonight. The major reason why that has been a short period of time is because we are in a time crunch, as you can see, for this July 1 deadline. However, we are very solidly committed towards really looking at these plans in depth, having a number of conversations, as Danielle mentioned, with all of the stakeholders. First, obviously, internally within the district to see what makes sense and what the specific needs are, but also with our external stakeholders, including our parents, our students, and the entire community, including the township as well. None of this has been brought before the township either, so we don't know what's feasible in terms of land development. Danielle talked about stormwater management as well, so we do have a number of issues that would need to be thoroughly discussed before the intent would be to move forward with any of this. And as you mentioned, Ben, obviously the very notion and concept of a K-2 building is something we've been there before in terms of what those configurations are. So obviously that would be a very significant selling point that would have to be made. What are the advantages of going back to a primary level school in terms of bringing a grade back, since we've already pushed that grade up into Erdenheim? So there are many, many conversations that would have to take place over a significant period of time before we would be ready to move forward with any final recommendations for a project.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask a follow-up? And obviously, another consideration will that be to figure out finances and debt service capacity as well, which is part of the finance committee. I know I have not been in conversations about building another new school. So I do have a question that I don't understand. So you don't have page numbers on your presentation, but it's around page 32. It's the slide that says submissions of plan con A and B, and its second bullet is submissions after July 1st will not be accepted. That doesn't sync with what I thought I heard you saying before, meaning they might change the rules, but not do away with the program. Help me understand that?
Well, if the budget is approved and that is implemented, it means that they're not going to accept any more plan con submissions after July 1st. That's the moratorium. There's two things. One is what's in his budget, and the other thing is in what's in the legislation in terms of a law change with the plan con process.
Okay, thank you.
Just again to clarify, so there's no consequence in the sense that if we do make a presentation by July 1st, and for whatever the reason, it doesn't come to fruition because of the need for more conversation, is there a penalty if we're not moving forward? If I understand, we're okay, we just need to do another feasibility study within 5 years to have it current. But there's no consequence if we're not moving, if we're not being productive.
A study needs to be updated every 2 years. So as long as your district-wide study continues to support the options that were submitted, then you're fine. If you take a whole different direction, then it's not relevant anymore. But
and another question, just in the sense, in the presentation, you talked about the building capacity, and in the presentation, if I understood it correctly, again and again, it highlighted the inability of Infield's building to hold the number of students that we anticipate in the future. But we haven't talked yet about an action plan as how to address that at the present time. So even in our presentation, we're talking about improving infield, but we still have the same problem of capacity in the middle school, not the middle school, at Erdenheim.
Right.
So is that, say that again?
Yeah, there was, I don't know if you recall, there was a slide talking about the bringing in modular classrooms in order to handle the bubble.
Correct, but I don't see that in the proposal that we're trying to make by July 1st.
Because you can't get reimbursement on modular classrooms.
So are we talking about that internally ourselves, about addressing that?
Yes, that was something that we had thrown about before, because obviously we can't build onto the space anymore. So the solution to that, because we felt it was a temporary bubble, was to bring in the modular classrooms for a period of a couple of years to handle that. And then as the enrollment moves through into the middle school, we'll be able to handle it with existing capacity there.
Will the property committee be able to talk about the modulars as we're also moving forward talking about constructing the cafeteria with respect to spacing?
Yeah, sure. We actually did clarify that in our committee meeting. We will need modular classrooms at Erdenheim, not this coming school year, but the following year, to accommodate the students.
That's to accommodate while we're constructing?
Yes, while we're considering this proposal and deciding what we're going to do.
There's space for both of those things to take place at the present time?
We did not actually talk, the modulars are needed regardless. Whether we move forward with any aspect of this plan or not, we will need modular classrooms in order to accommodate the increased enrollments that we project over the next couple of years.
And to answer your question, there's no penalty. If you want to withdraw your application, there's no penalty.
I just want to clarify one other thing, is when we talk about potentially considering a new school, a K-2 school at the Antonelli property, second grade is currently at Erdenheim. So adding that grade level back will alleviate those projected enrollments for Erdenheim for the next 10 years, because we will only have 3 grades there instead of 4. So once we get past the modular classrooms, and if we do decide to go to a K-2 school, we'll alleviate that problem altogether.
Yeah, you kind of have a pinch point. You have 2 grades at Enfield, then you go to 4, then to 3, and to 4. And the middle school and the high school have adequate capacity, and what you do if you did a K-2 center is that you would give adequate capacity across the board at all your schools. And so that if you had higher class sizes coming through, you wouldn't be panicking to try to figure out how to handle them, because you would be able to moderate all that population moving through the schools by...
If I can address your question or your statement about the finances, part of what we're approving tonight is to give Gilbert the go-ahead to start doing all those crunching, because part of your submission is going to be cost estimates and all of those, and timing, and we can start how this is going to be funded over this period of time. We're not doing everything at once. We're not going to renovate the high school and build a new school at the same time. It's going to be layered in. So once we have this completed, A and B, we'll have better numbers that I can bring to the finance committee and says, what does that look like? How are we going to fund it? And what does that look like with our existing debt?
I also want to remind the board that we do now have 3 more years where the Antonelli School will be on that property, so we're not in any rush to make any kind of decision, because we have it 3 years before we can even consider doing anything with that property.
I think that is helpful to remind everyone that this is a long-term process. I guess just 2 things, and I feel really strongly about how we've used our committees to structure work. So, Mr. Taylor, just like for me, just looking at the red box on the Erdenheim School slide around 26, I guess, I just not sure I get it, but I would just be clear that a new cafeteria plus modular classrooms fit in that slope. I don't get it, but again, I would really defer to the property committee, but I think I just want to make sure we're really good if that's going to come up a lot faster than 3 years. And then I was wondering, could you talk about the bubble? Where did it come from? Why do you think it's there? Is it coming back? Is it going away? Is it tough times and people move their kids from private school and put them back in public school? What happened that we got this bubble?
Yes. We didn't do the demographic study, so I actually... Combination of all of the above, probably. You know, turnover of housing. Got a great school district. People want to move here.
I think I recall that it is, a lot of these communities were built around 1950s or so. So as the original owners move out and the young families come in, and now those young families are all getting to be school-age kids. And then that's why it's going to eventually level out, because I remember them making the point that Springfield is pretty landlocked. There's not a lot of space for more development, unless, of course, something like one of the golf courses would become residential. That could affect our enrollment, but otherwise, it's pretty much stable as we move forward.
A lot of this is to look at, this is now shows what the possibilities are that can be going on for us, because there has been a lot of talk about what's going to happen with Antonelli and everything, and people know things still need to be done with the school district, and for the bubble too. Yeah, if you notice, even I noticed some of the for sale houses that are going up. It's a lot of the retirees are starting to move out. We're having younger couples move in, but we also do have those community developments that are going in all over the place. We have the one over on Willow Grove. We got the Tetchy property is going to be get developed. We have Pennsylvania Avenue that's going to be developed, and a lot of those I think were originally developed. They're originally talking about 50 being restricted, but that's been changed. So we do have that big influx that's coming into the community.
They did talk about that in the demographic study too. They did account for some of those developments that were already in progress.
For the modulars, one thing to keep in mind is that the steps were moved over. So we don't have those steps now going immediately down the one side of the building. That's been moved over, and a lot of that space that's sitting there right next to the cafeteria now is open. So when the time comes and we have to get somebody in to look at it, they'll be able to tell us exactly what size modulars we can fit in there. And the benefit to that too is it's already on top of impervious ground. instead of having it going somewhere else and we have to worry about anything else for, regulations as well.
And we'll talk to the new principal about how many classrooms that's going to take. Yeah.
I don't know. Did they tell you that?
I'm learning now.
Welcome to the world of running a school building, Mr. McLaurin. Okay, Danielle, thank you so much for a very comprehensive view of what potentially could lie ahead for all of us, and I think this helps to explain the board motion on number 11. Thank you, Mrs. Lipinski and Mr. Taylor as well for your clarifications on a number of items that we did discuss in the property committee meeting. So I appreciate your being here along with Rod. Rod, thank you as well for being here and for your excellent work that you did on the facility study up to this point.
Thank you very much for having us.
And I appreciate your timing, and I appreciate you bringing all this to our attention. Thank you. Okay, moving on to new business. Number 1, personnel attachment. The recommended motion: the Board of School Directors approves the following personnel as presented in the attachment: certificated personnel, support personnel, extended school year, ESY program personnel, conference workshop attendance. Is there a motion? Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Rayer. Aye. Mr. Richardson.
Aye.
Ms. Sarsfield.
Aye.
Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Number 2, Erdenheim Elementary School Principal, the recommended motion. The Board of School Directors approves the appointment of Andre McLaurin as Erdenheim Elementary School Principal at the salary of $116,000 effective July 1st, 2015. Is there a motion?
Aye.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Mr. King?
Mr. Rayer. Aye. Mr. Richardson. Aye. Ms. Sarsfield. Aye. Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor. Aye. Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Congratulations. Number 3, 2015-2016 board meeting dates, the recommended motion. The Board of School Directors approves the board meeting dates for the 2015-2016 year, attachment W. Is there a motion? Second?
Second.
Questions or comments?
Just one comment. I wanted to point out that one of the board meetings, regular board meeting, is on a Wednesday and not a Tuesday. That's because of Rosh Hashanah, one of the Jewish holidays. And also one of the interim board meetings is on a Monday. That's because of Election Day in November.
I have a question. I thought we were moving towards trying to, as much as we could, eliminate interim board meetings. So I see we have only 3 where you've tried to do that. And how many did we do this year, and why only 3?
This year, I believe we did do 3. We're certainly open to doing more than that. That would be whatever the board would like to do.
I think we've decided to just kind of do it on a month-by-month basis, but we know for sure that those are the months where we do have light agendas. So that's why we put it on the schedule.
Okay, thanks.
As a note.
Mr. Rayer. Aye. Mr. Richardson. Aye. Ms. Sarsfield. Aye. Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Number 4, Bucksmont Academy contract, recommended motion. The Board of School Directors approves the contract with Bucksmont Academy for the 2015-2016 school year, attachment X. Is there a motion? Motion. Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Mr. King?
Mr. Rayer. Aye. Mr. Richardson.
Aye.
Ms. Sarsfield.
Aye.
Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Number 5, confidential settlement and release. Recommended motion. The
Board of School Directors approves the confidential settlement and release for student 201-50518-01. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Rayer. Aye. Mr. Richardson. Aye. Ms. Sarsfield. Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor. Aye. Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Number 6, extended school year agreement with Devereaux. Recommended motion. The Board of School Directors approves the agreement between Devereaux and Springfield Township School District for student 201-40518-02 for the extended school year program. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Rayer. Aye. Mr. Richardson. Aye. Ms. Sarsfield.
Aye.
Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor. Aye. Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Number 7, release of the 2015-2016 proposed budget. Recommended motion. The Board of School Directors approves the release of the 2015-2016 proposed final budget per the attachment Y. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second? Any questions or comments?
Mr.
King?
Rayer. Aye. Mr. Richardson. Aye. Ms. Sarsfield. Aye. Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor. Aye. Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Number 8, My Learning Plan. Recommended motion. The Board of School Directors approves the agreement with Frontline Technologies Group, LLC, for their My Learning Plan Professional Development Management System, MLPPDMS, and the addition of My Learning Plan Observation and Appraisal Management System, MLPOASYS, through the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit Number 23 Consortium to begin May 2015. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second? Any questions or comments?
Mr. Rayer. Aye. Mr. Richardson. Aye. Ms. Sarsfield.
Aye.
Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor. Aye. Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Number 9, Kidview Inc. Days Off. Recommended motion. The Board of School Directors approves the Kidview Inc. Days Off proposal for the 2015-2016 school year as per the attachment Z. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Rayer. Aye. Mr. Richardson. Aye. Ms. Sarsfield.
Aye.
Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor. Aye. Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Number 10, Overbrook School for the Blind Agreement. Recommended motion. The Board of School Directors approves the agreement between the Overbrook School for the Blind and the School District of Springfield Township for summer extended school year services for a student. Attachment AA. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Rayer. Aye. Mr. Richardson. Aye. Ms. Sarsfield.
Aye.
Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor. Aye. Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Number 11, Gilbert Architects, Inc., PlanCon A and B. Recommended motion. The Board of School Directors approves the agreement with Gilbert Architects, Inc. in the amount not to exceed $10,000 plus reimbursable expenses for the submission to PDE of PlanCon A and B documents related to the new Enfield Elementary School project and renovations additions to the high school. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Mr. King?
Mr. Rayer. Aye. Mr. Richardson. Aye. Ms. Sarsfield.
Aye.
Ms. Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor. Aye. Ms. Lipinski.
Aye. Thank you. Are there any public comments on non-agenda items? Future meeting dates. Interim board meeting, Tuesday, June 2nd, 2015, 7 p.m., Freeze Memorial Lobby. School board meeting, Tuesday, June 16th, 2015, 7 p.m., Freeze Memorial Lobby. Board committee meeting, Property Committee will meet on Friday, June 12th, 2015, at 8:15 a.m. in the Administration Building. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for your time, and have a good night.